You might not think this, but quitting cocaine is much more simpler than you think. But it requires this one thing, which most of you aren't willing to do. But we'll get into that towards the end of the video, so make sure you stick around. Being brought up in the valleys of Wales in the United Kingdom, it was very difficult for me to stay away from social settings where the devil's dandruff kicked around. And still to this day, I remember my first line of cocaine. And it was a feeling like no other. Sitting in my Fiat Punto, outside the shops, in the area we hung around. CD case in one hand, chopped up straw in the other. I placed a straw inside my right nostril, tilted my head down, and proceeded to vacuum that line. Amongst the feeling of euphoria and the willing to say yes to everything in my life was about to change in ways I could never imagine, and it wasn't for the good. It all feels like a bad dream now, and thank God it's all over. 4+ years sober, 4 countries lived in, I now live in Bali, living my dream life. So enough about my story, let's talk about you and what drives you to using cocaine. I think we can all agree, being cocaine users, well for me, a former cocaine user, that the best part of getting cocaine is actually going to pick it up. That is when our dopamine levels spike. It's the initial, in the pub, 2 pints deep in, and someone coughs up, "Shall we get a bag?" Once those words have been let loose into the atmosphere, there's no pulling them back. You can't let it go. You won't let it go. The night is lost, ruined, doomed and destined for destruction. And you'll do everything in your power to make sure it happens. And deep down, you already know how this story's going to go. Still awake at 4 a.m, sitting in some random's kitchen with people you don't really know or like. Trying to get more as the same track plays over and over again. While some guy constantly sniffs and tries to unblock his nose. You're about to crack and lose control. 3 unread texts, 7 missed calls from your missus. You already know the damage is done and cannot be repaired. Now, there's a great quote. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result. You know deep down that you don't really enjoy this nonsense. It's the same old story, spending hundreds, if not thousands, every single month. Think about it this way. That's over £5,000 spent every single year minimum. £52,000 spent over a decade. Over £100,000 spent in 20 years. Think how much of a difference £100,000 would make to your life right now. And think about it this way. If you'd invested £100 every single month for over 20 years, you would have just over £138,000 in your bank right now. But let's just remove the money equation from this. How many more aspects is the marching powder taking over your life? Now let's look at some of the mental health aspects. Waking up with guilt and shame, these are the 2 most lowest frequency vibrations you can be in. How can you look at your boss in the eye after you've lied to him about being sick on a Monday morning? How can you even begin to perform at your best when you're arguing with your missus and your relationship is on the rocks? How is it even possible to focus? And there's your physical health. You've not eaten all weekend and your energy levels are through the floor. Your nose is blocked and you can't function properly because you've got brain fog. And I know this is the case because this was me for over a decade. Any consistency I could muster up was annihilated over the weekend. Now, I could never actually put my finger on how this kept happening until I moved from the UK to the other side of the world to Australia. That's when I noticed the true influence of environment. For the first time in my life, I was taken away from my social environment and all the temptations that surrounded it. Now, if you want to quit cocaine, I have only one solution for you, and you're not gonna like what I'm about to say. You need to quit alcohol. It's the only way. It's so simple, yet so obvious. It stares us in the face, but we somehow just choose to ignore it. How many times have you gone for one drink that's led to two, that's led to a phone call? We all know how this story's gonna go, because I certainly have. I remember one time in my early days in Australia where I went for just one drink during the daytime. I found myself still awake next Sunday, thousands of dollars down. And to top it all off, for some reason, I managed to shave all my beard off and just leave myself with an Australian tash. And then making matters even more worse, I went to work on Monday and burnt my finger with a blowtorch. I went to the hospital, I spent $150 to get myself patched up, and I also missed half a day in work. Not to mention the horrendous come down that I was on. Now it sounds so simple just for you to say, Ben, quit alcohol and all my problems go away, but it goes much deeper than this. Quitting alcohol alone will not work. It's like building a house on quicksand. Unless you have the foundations in place, it won't stand the test of time. I know this is the case because for me, I went 10 weeks and I went out and I ended back into my old ways. This is because I didn't have the proper protocols in place. When we say we want to quit, we have to have a real reason why. We have to find our pain point. This is going to give us the accountability that sticks the goal to the result. What happens if you don't do this? Will your wife leave you? Will you end up a failure? Or maybe all three? What's going to keep you sober? What are you going to work on the weekends that's going to keep you busy when you would otherwise be out on the piss?